It's Vietnam in 1969. You hang out with your other fellow draftees while smoking. One of your friends changes the channel from the American military's Armed Forces Vietnam Network to Radio Hanoi, where the chilling voice of a lady known as Hanoi Hannah reads off.
GI, your government has abandoned you. They have ordered you to die, GI. Do not trust them.
Hello, I'm Drunk Larry and welcome to my first video. Today we are going to be talking about Hanoi Hannah, a radio personality on the NVA side during the Vietnam War. Today we're going to dive into her and the haunting messages she left American GIs. So her actual name, and I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit, is Trin T. Nga, or Nga, something like that. You're supposed to say it with like a short N. Anyways, I'm just going to call her Hannah for the whole video. But she was born in Hanoi in 1931. Her father was a successful businessman who owned the biggest glass factory in all of French Indochina. Side note, the countries of Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam, and South Vietnam, they were all under the French Indochina. At least it was like a colony of France at the time. Indochina later got their independence in 1954 after many wars and many different battles. And then they just split up. So France had direct control over its territory and all the resources and everything that come out of it. By 1954, Indochina had gained its independence from France itself, and it split into the nations that were before mentioned, Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam, and South Vietnam, and then that's what spurs on the Vietnam War. So Hanoi Hannah started to learn English at a very young age because her parents let her get into these English teaching programs. Of course, her family is very wealthy and everything, and they were like, okay, you want to learn English because you want to learn your favorite movies without having to read the subtitles? So basically that's what they did for her. Her favorite movies were like Gone with the Wind and stuff like that, and she just didn't want to have to read the subtitles all the time. She wanted to be able to actually understand it. So they sent her to school. In 1955, she joined the Voice of Vietnam radio station and was chosen to read the English language newscast for listeners in English-speaking Asian countries. In 1965, Hannah began to be recognized by U.S. soldiers stationed in the region of Vietnam when she started to work on Radio Hanoi. During the Vietnam War, Radio Hanoi ran propaganda for the North Vietnamese Army, also known as the NVA. All of her speeches were intended to scare and shame U.S. soldiers so they would leave their posts to keep up fighting, basically. All of her speeches were intended to scare and shame U.S. soldiers so they would leave their posts or give up fighting. Each day she made 3 broadcasts, mainly just reading off the dead and all of the imprisoned U.S. soldiers from the Stars and Stripes newspaper that the American military put out. Radio Hanoi also played anti-U.S. war songs. So basically whenever there was a song like, okay, you know, stereotypical Creedence Clearwater, Fortunate Son. That, they would play songs like that to make U.S. soldiers be homesick and to want to go back home really bad and to stop fighting as well. American Navy ships also found themselves the target of Hanoi Hannah's broadcasts. She would often say things like, all of you are going to die, and then, just trying to scare them, basically. She would play messages of Americans giving their thoughts on the war and just saying that they were against it. Because later on, like in life, she said that Americans will believe their own people rather than the adversary. One of her most typical broadcasts went as follows.
They lie to you, GI. You know you cannot win this war. Your rich leaders grow richer while you die in the swamp, GI. They will give you a medal, GI. But only after you are dead.
All in all, there was very few desertions from Americans because of her propaganda that she pushed off of like Radio Hanoi. Soldiers, however, were sometimes impressed whenever she would display the correct location of their unit, which is odd because like then the enemy knows where you're at and everything. So wouldn't you be scared? I would. So this went on for a while, just as usual. She'd do the same thing over and over, and Americans loved to listen to her because she would give them correct reports of how many have been killed, how many have been imprisoned, when the American military wouldn't really give the correct numbers. They'd try to squish them down or, say something to make it seem like they were winning. Hanoi Hanna's broadcast ran for 8 years until 1973, when the last of American forces were leaving the country. And then 2 years later, the Vietnam War would end, and the two countries of North Vietnam and South Vietnam would be reunited as a communist country, therefore ending the war and all the effort that we ever put into it. I've listened to a couple of those different videos of her speaking, and holy shit, that's got to be the scariest thing. Like, once you're first listening to it for the first couple times, you're in a different country, you don't know where you're at, you're in the jungle and everything, or you're in some outpost that you've never even heard of until you get there, and then you're listening to the radio and you hear this lady telling you that you're gonna die. Like, that's crazy. But yeah, it must have been really scary, and I wanted to just put that out there and to show the research that I had done on it. I didn't go too deep into it, but my sources are linked, and thank you for watching the video.